It started with 2 children missing.
You have to take it in the context of what was going on at the time. Goes on, where's Alex? Is he coming after me next? He had his conversion to their, what people call a cult. One day or 1 week he was laughing at it, and the next week he had bought in completely.
When I moved up there, I did not see them.
No, they were gone.
Give us back our children.
Hello, true crime heroes. Welcome back to part 2 of our deep dive into the Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell case. Today, we continue to explore this twisted tale of deception, betrayal, and murder that spans time, space, and even the barrier between life and death. When we left off last time, it was a brand new 2020. Chad Daybell's wife of 30 years, Tammy, was dead, and Lori's 2 youngest kids, JJ and his sister Tylee, were still nowhere to be found. The same was true with newlyweds Chad and Lori. None of their friends and family could tell law enforcement where they were. If you thought our last video was intense, buckle up because the crazy just keeps coming. If you're new or new to the story, Lori Vallow Daybell was convicted in 2023 on multiple charges of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and grand theft. Her victims were Tylee, JJ, and Tammy. In this series, we are exploring the influences that shaped Lori's bizarre worldview. A worldview where Lori believed she was charged by Jesus himself to round up the 144,000 souls that are to be resurrected to heaven according to the book of Revelations in the New Testament. A worldview where she was an exalted goddess, singular in her beauty, exuding greatness, with divine abilities including teleportation, the ability to call up natural disasters, and the ability to smite her enemies with her mind. In this episode, we are going to focus on one of her older brothers, Alex Cox, a self-proclaimed protector, essentially the foot soldier she deployed to eliminate her enemies. We will also introduce Brandon Boudreau and Zulema Pastinas, who will help provide context for Lori's motives and mindset. If you haven't seen part 1, I recommend you watch that one first and then come back to this one. This case is sprawling and we will be tackling it all, so check out the playlist for additional videos. Hello and welcome to the channel, where we explore true crime, false prophets, and pop culture. If you like this video, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content like this. Let's dive in. Lori's erratic behavior started well before her kids went missing. Her older brother Alex had long viewed himself as the protector of Lori as she battled the demons, zombies, and dark spirits that inhabited her world. During the waning years of her 14-year marriage to her 4th husband, Charles Vallow, Lori became convinced that Charles was possessed by an evil demon named Ned Schneider. It had gotten so bad that Charles filed for divorce. With battle lines firmly drawn, Alex shot and killed Charles in a contrived setup. He claimed self-defense and no charges were brought at the time. However, after JJ and Tylee were found and investigators uncovered more information, Alex's role became clearer. At trial, the prosecution played a recording of a patriarchal blessing Chad gave Alex, confirming Alex's sacred role as the protector of the divine goddess that Lori was, and thanked him for his deeds. But that wasn't the end of it. Little did we know that Charles's death was only one of the many times that Alex was willing to do violence on Lori's behalf. Cast your mind back to 2019 in Gilbert, Arizona. Brandon Boudreau was married to Lori's niece, Melanie. This Melanie is spelled with an I. Yes, there are 2 Melanies in this story, so we will refer to this Melanie as Melanie P. Melanie P was also one of Chad and Lori's followers. Melanie P and Brandon were in the process of finalizing a contentious divorce, and the custody battle was brutal. Brandon had the kids due in part to Melanie P's erratic behavior. Just as Lori had turned on Charles, claiming he was a demon, Melanie too had started to use the same descriptions for Brandon. On the morning of October 2nd, Brandon had just finished dropping his kids off at school and returned home around 9 a.m. As he turned into his driveway, he noticed a car across the street that looked familiar. It was a dark Jeep Wrangler with Texas plates. He knew the plate number because he had arranged insurance for the car for Charles when Charles was alive. He also knew that it was the car that Tylee had driven since Charles's death. But Tylee, JJ, Lori, and even Alex were all in Idaho. It was odd to see the car parked across the street with no driver. He also noticed that the Jeep had been modified. It didn't have its standard spare tire and rack that was usually on the back. All of this went through his head as he opened the car door and planted his feet on the ground. As he stood up and glanced back at the Jeep, he saw its tailgate window roll down and the muzzle of a gun, outfitted with a silencer, pointed straight at him and fired around. Luckily, the bullet narrowly missed him and hit the car instead. The Jeep was speeding away before he could even wrap his head around what had happened. It might have been his imagination, but for the bullet hole in his car just inches from his chest. It was terrifying. Alex was long gone by the time police confirmed the license plate ID was connected to him. This is just one example of the seemingly random events that didn't become fully fleshed out until all the different agencies, including the FBI, the local police departments, and the like, started methodically fitting the puzzle pieces together. In this instance, investigators compiled phone records that showed Alex had searched for Brandon's new rental address in Idaho 13 hours before he traveled to Arizona in the Jeep. They tracked the Jeep on multiple highway cameras to and from Idaho. Call records and cell tower data indicated Alex's phone had been communicating with Chad Daybell back in Idaho throughout Alex's drive to Arizona and back. Once the Jeep was in police possession, they found traces of gun residue as well as Alex's DNA at the rear of the car. Prosecutors argued that the removal of the tire rack in the back seat was necessary for Alex to be able to roll down the back window and fire on Brandon. This also allowed him to then quickly scramble back to the driver's seat and flee the scene. Like a rotting onion, each layer investigators peeled back revealed a darker layer underneath. In the getting rid of spouses game, Charles and Brandon weren't the only husbands who suffered at the hands of Lori and Alex. The sad story of Joe Ryan, Lori's third husband, provided prosecutors additional context to how Lori and Alex's criminal tactics and intent developed over time. Joe and Lori's tumultuous relationship began in Austin, Texas in 2001. After they married, the couple adopted Colby, Lori's 5-year-old son. Ty Lee was born in September 2002. However, by 2005, the union soured, leading to a bitter divorce and a bitter custody battle. Lori accused Joe of sexually abusing Ty Lee, an allegation never substantiated by investigators. The therapist assigned to the case even indicated in her report to the court that she believed Lori had coached Ty Lee in making these false claims. After a protracted legal struggle where Ty Lee recanted her statement, Joe regained visitation rights. After an entire year of estrangement from his young daughter, Joe was finally allowed to reconnect with her, supervised at a CPS office. Lori was enraged. She doubled down on her allegations, relentlessly pushing the narrative that Joe was an abuser and complaining that he shouldn't be allowed to see Ty Lee. Lori and Alex even went further and plotted a revenge. As Joe was leaving his visit, Alex showed up at the facility and attacked Joe. Joe hadn't met Alex in person, so he didn't recognize him at first. As Alex approached Joe in the parking lot, he knocked Joe to the ground and tasered him in the back. Joe managed to gain his feet again, but was disoriented, and Alex knocked him down a second time. This time, the fall fractured Joe's wrist. Alex continued to tase Joe as he struggled to crawl away. The attack only stopped when the commotion drew a crowd. As Joe got up and began to compose himself, his heart sank. Through a facility window, he saw Ty Lee's stricken face. The 5-year-old had witnessed the entire brutal attack. Alex was eventually apprehended and prosecutors charged him with felony aggravated assault. Alex pled guilty and spent 3 months in jail. Far from remorseful, Alex turned the traumatic incident into material for his amateur comedy routine. Here he is at an open mic night in Austin.
I was fortunate enough to do a little jail time last year. I'll confess to you guys. You ever had something that you knew was the right thing to do, but it turns out that later on it was a felony? This is a true story. I found out that my ex-brother-in-law was a pedophile, so I took a stun gun and I discharged it right in his nutsack. And I did. And in Texas, that's a felony. I'm thinking, maybe I'll get a handshake or a parade or something.
What I find so interesting about this clip is how convinced Alex is about his right to violence. I'm fascinated by how this certainty seems to clear any pangs of conscience he might hold and allow him to grow from assaulter to murderer and then from murderer of grown men to annihilator of children. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's turn back to Joe. Later, when Lori married Charles Vallow and moved to Arizona, Joe relocated there as well in an effort to rebuild his connection with Ty Lee. But the rift between father and daughter never really healed. Then, in April 2018, Joe's body was found after a neighbor reported a foul smell coming from his small apartment. At 59, Joe was found dead in his sparsely furnished home, having lain there alone for almost a week. He apparently suffered a heart attack, though rumors persist that Lori may have had something to do with his death. This rumor is fueled by the reports that a friend of Lori's told police that Lori said she was grateful it took so long for the body to be discovered because of the advanced state of the body's decay. As tantalizing as this rumored evidence is, it hasn't been vetted by prosecutors that we know of or litigated in a court of law. The investigation into Tammy's death prompted Arizona authorities to revisit Joe's death as they had done with hers. They disinterred and re-examined the body, but based on the evidence they had at hand, Joe was confirmed to have died of natural causes. But that doesn't mean that Joe's death didn't cast a shadow on Lori's trial. Lori, like Alex, wasn't shy about using Joe as a subject to advance her own agenda. Investigators uncovered a recording of a podcast where Lori candidly admitted to seriously considering murdering Joe. Here's the clip that was played at trial.
He told everybody that I was this lying, crazy Mormon and got up in court and said all these horrible things about me and turned it around to where the judges believed him instead of me. And he was constantly trying to get custody of my 3-year-old daughter and just to rub it in my face. And I went through a lot of years of this kind of hard stuff. And I was going to murder him. I was going to kill him, like the scriptures say, like Nephi killed him, just to stop the pain and to stop him coming after me and to stop him coming after my children.
The prosecutors brought this testimony in to showcase Lori's propensity to cast those who oppose her as obstacles that deserve to be dealt with violently. Additionally, it reflects Lori's growing awareness that death can be profitable. Remember that Lori was charged with grand theft alongside her murder and conspiracy charges. The reason is that she shamelessly continued to collect both JJ and Tylee's Social Security benefits, raking in close to $30,000 in the months after her kids were dead. Those benefits were courtesy of the deaths of Joe and Charles. With both Lori and Chad behind bars, prosecutors began to weave together their theory of the crime. According to them, Lori and Chad gave the orders and Alex carried them out. It was he who killed JJ and Tylee, and he was the masked gunman who shot at Tammy 11 days before she was killed. They corroborated this by using GPS on Alex's phone. This showed he was close to the Daybell residence on the day Tammy was shot at, as well as the day she died. More gruesomely, Alex's phone was also near the Daybell residence on September 9th, the day after the last known sighting of Tylee. A little context here. Chad and Tammy's property was several acres and located in a rural area. They had designated a spot at the edge of the property they called the Pet Cemetery, and they had erected a statue of a dog to mark the space. So on the day after Tylee went missing, just 15 minutes after Alex's GPS indicated he had left the Daybell property, Chad sent a message to Tammy. The message said, "I spotted a big raccoon along the fence. I hurried and got my gun, and he was still walking along. I got close enough that one shot did the trick. He is now in the pet cemetery." This text was entirely out of character for how Chad usually communicated with Tammy. The unprompted story of the raccoon was most likely an effort to explain away any activity neighbors might have noticed while Alex and Chad were digging in that area. Sure enough, when they uncovered the bodies of Tylee and JJ, they also found the remains of a dog and a cat, but there was no raccoon. And it was Alex who was the last person seen with JJ. The last picture of JJ was taken the night of September 23rd as he sat in his red PJs playing with his iPad. According to Melanie Gibbs, who was staying over at the townhome with her boyfriend, Alex carried the sleepy boy up to bed, and that was the last time he was ever seen alive. Some of the most heartbreaking testimony during the trial came as detectives described finding JJ's body just a few feet from Tylee's, still wearing the same red pajamas. But although prosecutors named Alex as a co-conspirator and a key player in all 3 Idaho deaths, Charles Vallow's death in Arizona and the attempted murder of Brandon, he will never be brought to justice. He wouldn't even make it to Christmas 2019. Alex Cox died in Arizona on December 12th, just one day after Tammy Daybell's body was exhumed, which raised more than a few eyebrows. At only 51, Alex wasn't that old, but he did have high blood pressure. His death has been officially ruled a heart attack by natural causes, but is that what really happened? Alex's autopsy showed that he had indications of unusual blood clots wedged in the arteries of his lungs. He also had the overdose drug Narcan in his system. And of course, you cannot get around the suspicious timing of his death. But who might have had the motive to cause him harm? Lori and Chad had fled Idaho by this time and weren't telling anyone where they were. However, despite near radio silence for weeks, Chad did speak to Alex by phone the day he died to bestow a patriarchal blessing. Does this mean that Alex needed a dose of indoctrination because he was beginning to doubt his role in the scheme? Was there someone else in Alex's orbit physically closer to him who might have had the opportunity to do him harm? As it turns out, Alex's death came just 2 weeks after he wed his second wife, Zulema Pastinas, on December 1st. Zulema was another Chad and Lori acolyte who believed wholeheartedly in their demons and zombies worldview. She was a trusted soldier. Chad had bestowed upon her the power of creating fire with her mind, and she believed Chad was the younger brother of Jesus Christ, calling him JTL for James the Lesser. Chad and Lori had encouraged the match. Some have speculated that this was because Alex was growing nervous that he was the one always getting his hands dirty, and it would be helpful to have Zulema around in case he wavered. What we do know for a fact is that Zulema was a frequent visitor to Rexburg. Chad had been pressuring her to move there permanently. She was there the day Tammy was shot at in her driveway as she was returning from her grocery shopping. Of course, we know from the cell phone records mentioned above that the shooter was Alex. According to Zulema's testimony, she was with Lori and a few other women in the Rexburg townhome when Lori got a call right around the time of the incident. Though Lori had excused herself to a back room to take the call, Zulema could hear Lori very clearly. She sounded very, very angry, scary angry. "He can't do anything right," Lori yelled. While Zulema claimed not to know what the commotion was about at the time, she said she now feels Lori's frustration was because Alex had first missed Brandon and now he had failed in taking out Tammy. Zulema testified that the tensions between the two couples grew throughout October and November 2019, and that by Thanksgiving, the tight-knit group had begun to unravel. Lori and Chad stopped returning Alex and Zulema's calls and let the holiday pass with no word. A frustrated Alex said to Zulema, "Can you believe they're being such jerks after how much I helped them? Now they don't even want to talk to me." After Melanie Gibbs's confrontational call with Chad and Lori in early December, she called Zulema to fill her in. We covered this call in the first video, so if you haven't seen that video, I'll link it here. Gibbs told Zulema she believed they had both been deceived by Lori and Chad. Zulema told the court, "I didn't know what to think or how to process that information. To hear my friend saying that all this was happening and then at the same time knowing how much trust I had put into these two people, it was very, very confusing." She further said she confronted Alex and asked about the children. Alex, in turn, was very quiet, not his usual self. "He just didn't answer me," Zulema said. On the day Alex died, Zulema asked him why they would be exhuming Tammy's body. She asked him outright if he had anything to do with her death. Again, she testified he was very quiet and unresponsive. And then he said, "I think I'm being their fall guy." Zulema said, "Fall guy for what? What is it that you have done? What have you done that you would be the fall guy for?" She said he didn't answer directly, but as he walked away, he said, "Zulema, either I am a man of God or I am not." Alex died later that day. So even though Lori wasn't held directly responsible for Joe or Alex's death, the number of mysterious deaths connected to her is far above average. Side note here, there's yet another suspicious death involving the mother of Melanie P., Stacy Cox, that we will dive into in a future video. So stay tuned for that. Throughout her divorce and custody battle with Joe, Lori created a toxic environment that targeted someone she believed to be her enemy and alienated them from their daughter. Having done this successfully with Joe, she used the same alienation tactics on Charles. But effective alienation techniques weren't the only lessons Lori learned. She learned something else that was even more sinister and went directly to the heart of her motives for murder. She learned that a husband's death could be lucrative. Lori was paid $60,000 in life insurance benefits in addition to the monthly benefits Tylee collected. It is a little wonder that she was so mad that Charles had changed his policy to make Kay his beneficiary, depriving her of her anticipated $1 million payout. Lori wasn't about to make the same mistake twice. When she and Chad planned Tammy's death, they were smarter. Chad convinced Tammy to double her life insurance the month before she was killed and made sure he was the beneficiary. Chad and Lori collected $430,000 from Tammy's life insurance policy. This was the money the couple relied upon during the months on the run from law enforcement. So this is where we'll end this video for now. Next time, we'll look at events surrounding Chad and Lori's capture, trial, and where the cases stand at this time. If you're still watching this, thank you so much for watching till the end. This is a complicated and sprawling case, and what I've presented here honestly just skims the surface. If you would like to hear more about the trial, testimony, East Idaho News has published all of it on its website. Nate Eden, a reporter who's been involved in this case since day one, his reporting as well as his insights are valuable, and I recommend checking out both East Idaho News and his channel Meetin' the Edens. Please join us for the next video where we will wrap up Lori's trial, her sentencing, and talk about where we stand with Chad's trial that is scheduled to take place later this summer. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you didn't, it's perfectly fine to give it a dislike. Either way, I'd love to know your thoughts about the case, so please leave a note in the comments. Until next time, be safe, be well, love yourself, love your neighbor. Bye for now.